Holy cow. I am unbelievably excited for this one. We have never done a live on location stream before. We do a live stream, Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce, office hours live every Wednesday at 11:30 in the AM. You know it. You love it. It's your favorite show. I know. But we've never done it live and on location. And the reason why we're doing it live and on location today is because we're at the Wisconsin Veterans Business Conference, the fourth annual 2021 Wisconsin Veterans Business Conference. And instead of just canceling the thing, which would have been lame, we decided, heck, let's do a live one. And then let's talk about how we do it, why we do it, why you should do it, or maybe why you shouldn't do it. Does your business or brand, have you had conversations behind the scenes where you've said, I think we need to have a podcast? Somebody else says, why? And somebody else replies, I don't know, but we should probably do it. That conversation.
Because it's the new thing.
It's the new
That's
thing.
Why.
Everybody wants a podcast now. So do you need a podcast? Can you generate revenue? Can you generate business? Should you go on this endeavor, on this journey? Because you can't do it halfway. That's a great way to waste time and money. All right. And you don't have to take my word for it. We have two experts here today, which I'm going to introduce to you after our bumper here. Dusty Weis from Podcamp Media. He's also the host and creator of the Lead Balloon podcast, which is a award-winning, nationally renowned podcast. It's spectacular. He recently had an episode where he interviewed somebody from the Red Cross disaster relief. I mean, it was incredible. Check out that podcast. And then Ben Killoy here from the Military Veteran Dad podcast, which is in the veteran space, one of the most well-known and longest enduring veteran podcasts. So these guys are the experts. You don't have to take my word for it. We're going to let them tell you why you should or why you shouldn't start a podcast. And then how the heck do you even get started? Because it's a pretty overwhelming prospect. We're going to get into that. And let me tell you, if you are watching at home, if you're watching at home on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, or YouTube, and you cannot hear me, please throw it in the comments. That sure would be embarrassing. I'm pretty sure you can, but throw it in the comments. Let us know. I'm so excited for this. I'm ready to go. We're going to get into all of it right after this. Everybody just got pumped up because we were lucky because the music that y'all heard at home just went through the speakers, and it gets me pumped up every time. Howdy, live on location, office hours, our weekly show at 11:30 a.m. I'm Adam from the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. I am joined by Dusty Weis from Podcamp Media, Ben Killoy of the Military Veteran Dad podcast. Guys, I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about your background in the podcasting world. And let's dive into educating everybody about why they should or shouldn't get into this industry. Dusty, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you for the invite, as well as sort of a sad commentary on how long it's been since I did any kind of a live event. You do enough live events and it's kind of like, all right, you're going to go through the process. You get up in the morning, you get the kids to daycare, you get the suit, you get, go over your talking points real quick and roll out with it. And so I didn't budget enough time, because what I didn't realize was the last time that I wore this suit was in March of 2020. I was up on Capitol Hill interviewing a couple members of Congress for a client's podcast. And then I got back and I took the suit to the dry cleaner. And then I didn't look at it for 20 months. Oh boy. And that's insane. And so the suit was in a plastic bag.
It fits you nice.
The dress shoe. Oh, no, it doesn't. No, that's another alarming thing, because this part right here is not what it used to be after pandemic. Yeah. And the dress shoes were all covered in a coat of dust. And so it was, it's nice being out of the house again. It's good to see some live faces here. Yeah, and thank you so much for the invite.
You bet.
My background, I'm the president and founder of Podcamp Media. We are a Milwaukee-based podcast production agency for businesses that want to use podcasting as a part of their communication strategy. How does one get into that? How do you become that? Essentially, I've had a perfect storm of experiences in my life. I worked in radio for 10 years, and so I got the background working with microphones and doing all that kind of stuff. Then I moved into a public relations, media relations, strategic communications role at a couple of places, Milwaukee City Hall, and then on to the Association of Equipment Manufacturers. And one of the things that we did at AEM was we launched a podcast for our members to get them excited about new and emerging technologies. And given my background in broadcasting, we did the whole thing in-house. We didn't outsource it. And it kind of exceeded all of our expectations by like a factor of 10x. And so then my phone started ringing, people asking me, so wait, how do we launch a podcast for our brand? And I realized there was a business opportunity there. And for the past 2.5 years now, I have been helping brands and associations make podcasts to tell their story. We also, as you mentioned, we produce a podcast in-house called Lead Balloon. I use it as sort of a showroom floor and a demonstration of our techniques to potential clients. It is a show about marketing and public relations professionals basically telling the story of the most traumatic thing that ever happened to them on the job. Disasters in press conferences, branding nightmares, bad decisions coming down from the executive suite, and how communications professionals have had to navigate those. It was named last year by Adweek as 2020 Marketing Podcast of the Year. So we have a lot of fun with that. But again,
it's spectacular.
Just
I mean, it really is great.
Stop.
It's
Go
great.
on. But thank you so much again for the
you
invite.
betcha. Appreciate it, Dusty. So Ben, why a podcast? How did you get into the podcasting world? And I know we've talked about this, but I think everybody should hear the story.
So my story, I'm a Marine veteran, husband, father, average guy from Southern Wisconsin. And for me, coming out of the Marine Corps in 2007, I had this like feeling of like, I'm missing something. I had done the corporate life for 10 years. I had done this path that it was assigned to me, and it wasn't working. I dropped out of college, and I had to figure out what this thing was going to be next, because I was like, that was supposed to make things all better by going to college. And so for those 3 years after that, I was 2014, I was just kind of lost. I was learning a lot, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. And people would keep telling me, like, Ben, the way you say things, it's unique. It's not something everybody does. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because no one's ever said that before. And I kept getting that feedback. And so my mindset going into podcasting, like I'd listen to podcasts. I was like, guys like me don't do podcasts, so I should probably not. But then eventually I got to the point where I was like, you know what, let's just go it in, because I had enough people telling me I need to start a podcast. So I started Military Veteran Dad in January of 2019. And it started with a simple mission to really prove myself wrong, that guys like me can do podcasts, and understanding what it could do, why you should do it, understanding what they can do even. So Dusty helps the businesses run the podcast. For me, it was understanding what my voice could actually do, understanding what my story could do. Because the more times you say your story, the more time you talk about your story, the more times you talk to other people that have similar backgrounds, you find commonalities that you can't see in its current form. And so for me, it's been this 3-year extra, like coming up in January, it'll be 3 years now. And it's been this 3-year exercise of helping other dads come home, not just physically, but emotionally to their family. But then also for me, like understanding what my story could do, where it could be applied, and what mountains it could move. Because as a professional speaker, which is now my career and job, I've understood that you put the words together in a certain way, you can move a mountain for someone and change how they see the world. A podcast gave me the ability to articulate, and just like a gym rep with a dumbbell weekly, I was exercising my words to understand what I could do with them.
Yeah, and Ben is one of the most insanely insightful guys I've ever met in my entire life, and especially in the veteran world. There are a lot of veteran podcasts that pop up overnight, and they don't endure. Endurance is one of the most important and one of the hardest things about podcasting. We can talk about that in a minute, but the fact that he's had a successful and steadily growing podcast, producing great content for the last 3+ years, is a testament to just the sheer amount of insights you have in your mind and the hard work that you put into it. I think we should start with not necessarily why should you start a podcast, because everybody's heard the anecdotes. You do it, you make money, you promote your blah, 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 Let's talk about why you shouldn't. If this pops up in a meeting, we should do a podcast. Okay, why? What criteria? Why would you not want to start a podcast?
May I?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I have thoughts on this.
Okay,
I actually,
right. I asked that because I see 5 reasons not to launch
You're
a podcast.
peeking at my notes, man.
Yeah,
that's cheating. When I launched Podcamp Media, one of the first things that I did after I got the website up and running, I got registered with the government to pay the taxes and all of that, is I sat down and I authored a blog post called 5 Reasons Not to Start a Podcast for Your Brand. And I did it in part to be kind of tongue-in-cheek, to be kind of sassy about it, but also because there has been an influx of bad podcasts into the podcast space. And again, you always have to level set when you get into these things. First and foremost, show of hands. Who here listens to podcasts? We got podcast listeners? Okay. So most of us, but sometimes still you have to explain to people, well, what is a podcast? A podcast is a radio program. You get it on demand. So unlike the radio, you can listen on your own schedule. And you can listen to it through an app on your phone. You can listen to it through your computer. You can listen to it through your smart device, your Alexa, your Google Home, whatever you want to call it. And it's just another way to stay informed and on top of what's going on. And so I wrote this blog post called 5 Reasons Not to Launch a Podcast because I saw so many brands getting into the podcast space and putting out really mediocre content. And Adam, you used the word content. As a content marketer, my last title was content marketing before I started the company. I hate the word content because it sounds like something you load onto a pallet, you ship out in 50-ton increments. You've got a guy with 2 of those little orange sticks when you arrive, and he says, all right, just back up the content truck, bring it right on out here. And that's not what content should be. Content should be videos. It should be articles. It should be blog posts. It should be stories first and foremost. It should be engaging on a human level, because if it's just words, if it's just 1,200 words of content, nobody's going to give a crap. If it's just 40 minutes of podcast content, just 2 schmucks sitting behind microphones yapping, you're not going to do anything with it. And so the 5 rules that I have, the 5 reasons not to launch a podcast are: 1, if you have nothing original to say; 2, if you don't have a compelling story to tell; 3, if you have not sat down and clearly defined your niche, clearly defined whom you are speaking to; 4, if you won't invest in your podcast sounding professional and polished; and 5, if you are impatient to see results tomorrow. Those are 5 great reasons not to launch a podcast. Now, that is not to say that every company out there cannot launch a podcast. If they can find something original to say, if they can find a compelling story to tell, if they will take the time to clearly define their niche and invest in sounding professional and polished, and they are willing to invest the time and patience required to grow a podcast audience, you can see some incredible ROI from a podcast.
So, and I do want to talk about the ROI because it's really interesting, and also because it's the next thing that I see on your notepad there. But Ben, do you have anything that you want to add about that? What are some reasons not to start a podcast? I agree with the storytelling one. That's the most important part.
So for me, there's lots of, I find that indie podcasters is who I'm often talking to, but even from a business point of view, you really have to look at your business, even as your content marketing, to avoid using that word, your storytelling. Look at the season of your business that you're in. Because sometimes every idea is a good idea, but it's not the right idea for right now. And in the world of where we live today, every week there's something new that you should be, some new shiny object you should be paying attention to. So you really have to look at where's the cycle of our business, and maybe what's the best season. Because something within podcasting is seasons. It doesn't have to be something you do every week. It can be something, you know what, like the spring is our slow time. This would be the right time to do a podcast. This time would be the time to do the production of it. And then maybe we launch it in weekly series later in the year. Making sure that's the right season. To me, like, that's the best advice, because not every idea you hear, it's not that it's a bad idea. You first need to ask, is it the right idea?
So I think, for some reason, banking always comes to mind for me. So if I work for a bank and we're having a meeting and somebody says we should probably launch a podcast,
Can you use that voice that you do in your TikTok videos where you're like the stuffy corporate boss guy?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because I think that's a really appropriate voice to use here.
It is, oh gosh, I'm not sure if I can do it on spot. I need the hat. I
The
need
hat
that I
is
wear.
what does it. Adam has incredible TikTok videos, if you haven't checked them out, where he has a conversation with himself as like the employee and the stuffy boss guy. And,
with a Russian hat, if I remember.
Yes, the hat.
Correct.
The hat is what sells it.
It is
but-
like Soviet era. I bought it at a market in Kyrgyzstan. It's got a little hammer and sickle on the other end. It's crazy. But yeah, if I'm in banking and we're talking about launching a podcast, we could just have podcast episodes where we talk about our banking products, free checking. That's pretty exciting, right? Everybody loves free checking. So if we're stuck, like, what do we talk about? What are some ways that we can dig deep to find stories in places where we may not consider stories? Like, are there stories in the banking world? There aren't a lot of banks out there doing podcasts.
So, Adam, if I came to you and I said, hey, I've got an idea.
Mhm.
We're going to produce a program wherein we talk about our products and services for 45 minutes. Would you say, oh, that's a podcast? No,
It's a commercial.
that's an infomercial.
Yeah.
Those have been around for decades and people hate infomercials. So
Right.
why would you ever want to produce a podcast for your company that is an infomercial?
That's a great insight.
Instead, you need to drill down and find that compelling story that sets your bank, in this case, apart from that. And I went through this with a local realty company that I won't name, that came to me and they said, we're thinking about doing, and they were really excited too. I hated to sink their shit.
Balloon,
Oh,
Lead balloon.
I tried to let them down easy, but they're like, we want to do a podcast where we talk about the conditions that are influencing the market in real estate. And I said, I'm going to pull out my phone. I'm going to search real estate market and 10,000 results of other podcasts that are doing that right now. And they have been doing it longer than you have, and they have a head start on amassing a following. You're not going to have a lot of luck launching a podcast that just does that. But they had not found their compelling story. They had not found something original to say, and they had not clearly defined their niche. And so you look at a real estate company or a bank. What's the story? What's the story of the bank? Why do I care about that bank? Find a way.
Where do you find those? Where do you find those stories? Is it with the end user? Is it with the people that are on the receiving end of your products or services? Is it through your employees, or any or all of the above?
Yes, all of the above. I think it starts with really sitting down and doing some soul searching about who you are as a company, putting a face and a story to that. And people don't always like that because soul searching can be uncomfortable. A lot of companies don't soul search for the same reason that a lot of people don't soul search. They're afraid of what they're going to find inside when they take a look.
So you're telling me that my bank wants to start a podcast and I should talk about our employees overcoming adversity, our end users and of our products, using our products to succeed and achieve and overcome. When do I talk about my products and services? How do I make money on this? Storytelling doesn't add to the bottom line, does it?
So for me, I love that you all gave me this look, because one of my favorite things for podcasting is to not talk about the what you do, is to really take Simon Sinek's advice and start with why you do it. Imagine if Apple created a podcast about why they do it, like what's really behind thinking different, and that was their content out there that every other company could copy about how they think different as a culture. What do they do to hire people that think differently? Southwest Airlines, what does it really mean to have the heart be the center of the machine? What does it really mean when you tell the why behind what you do? And the cool part with these real estate, all these different things, your company could actually just be the sponsor of the podcast. You could give your 30-second ad read in a podcast while you're telling the stories. One of my favorite real estate examples of a great real estate podcast is where you create a podcast that highlights local resources in your town, highlight the schools, interview principals, interview what makes this town amazing. And by the way, when you're looking for a house, I can help you. Because people are looking to understand what makes this town good. Is it something worth moving to? That's something that people could look for. And there's not going to be many podcasts about moving to Milwaukee or any of the other suburbs in the area. And you begin the person of you offer all this value. And on the side, when you need a real estate, I'm your man. And they trust you because you've been giving them advice and they know you in the back of their ears. So it's like, makes sense.
So it's more subtle. We're not overtly advertising. We're actually deliberately staying away from advertising. We're telling a story, and then at the end saying, oh, by the way, if you need this, come to us.
I mean, you could make a fun podcast that has nothing to do with anything that, say, 4 employees just really love doing, and you think your target market would really love hearing about, and let you be the sponsor of it. Like you can break there's no rules in podcasting. You can create a podcast about anything. You could create, if any product that you do, you could just go to the end of it and just tell stories about who uses it. And like, it's really cool of how you can create something worth listening to that has nothing to do with your business, but then bring your product as the official sponsor of it. I mean, podcasts are sponsored by products all the time that have nothing to do with the podcast they're listening to. And it happens all the time.
And so it can lead to business then, even if we're not. So we're trying to avoid the infomercial. We're trying to avoid direct advertising. We're trying to tell stories, compelling stories, and just an ancillary benefit as it leads to potential business opportunities, product sales opportunities. What are some of those return on investment items?
Absolutely. And just to pile on what Ben said there for a second too, it's effective because you're putting your listener first, which is what successful podcasts do. Your podcast is not about your brand. It is a benefit of your brand to your customers, your listeners. And so as you are strategizing how to launch a podcast for your brand, it starts with those listeners. It starts with defining who they are, who's in the niche, but then building a show catering to their needs and wants and what entertains them. And that's where I think the wisdom really is in what you said there, Ben, is it doesn't have to be about your business. It could be a radio drama. People forget that the soap operas are called soap operas because originally these shows, Days of Our Lives, what have you, were sponsored by one sponsor. It was essentially Dial Soap that was saying, this is the Dial Soap Days of Our Lives hour. And they would sponsor the entire program. And then live on set, they would break character, pull out a block of soap and say, have you tried Dial Soap? And then they'd go back to like the intrigue and the murder mystery and the who's secret twin and all of that thing.
It's like a real life Truman Show.
I had no idea. I learned something today. I had no idea.
But
That's
you're
amazing.
essentially, you are the singular sponsor of a piece of entertainment or information that people are seeking out. And you ask about the ROI, and that is the first piece of the ROI puzzle right there, is this is a top of funnel lead generation opportunity for the business owners in the house. You're familiar with the sales funnel. The top is just getting people aware of your brand, and then you work them down through this nurture process. And I don't remember what all the steps are, but then at the bottom of the funnel, that's the sale. Your podcast can be a very powerful top of funnel awareness building opportunity, just as a first point of contact, and then to get people into the habit of coming back to you for information, for entertainment, for whatever it is that they're getting out of that podcast. And so that's really the second part of the ROI puzzle here, is sustained engagement. Right now, we hear a lot. I was meeting yesterday with the vice president of a company that does pay-per-click advertising on Google, and that's a really potent tool too, and it needs to be a part of your sales strategy. But when we're talking about a piece, a little picture on Facebook or an ad that people see on Google, we're talking about engagement that lasts for a fraction of a second. Adweek calculated out, they did a survey, and the average amount of time that people engage with a piece of Facebook content is 1.7 seconds. I mean, that's a blink of an eye and it's gone. And you just paid for that ad. When somebody listens to your podcast, according to Edison, they did the research and they found that something like, I'm going to fudge the numbers now. It's like 75% of monthly podcast listeners.
75% of statistics are all made up. So you're on
on the spot. On the spot. Very high number of podcast listeners listen to the entire episode or most of an episode. And we're talking about podcasts that run 30, 40, 50 minutes. And so 2 seconds versus, what is that, 2,400 seconds is 40 minutes right there. We're talking about a rate of engagement that is 1,000 times better in podcasting.
Absolutely.
Then there are these other corollary benefits. You get a pretext for business-to-business interaction. And this is something that surprised me when I launched Lead Balloon as a podcast, because very early on in the process, it immediately resulted in the acquisition of a new flagship client. I called up a guy that I thought had a really interesting story to tell for my podcast, completely innocently, not trying to pitch them, not trying to sell them. I just wanted to talk to the guy and hear his story. And we finished our interview after half an hour. And I said, all right, we're done recording. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous. And he says, oh, hold on, don't go. What's your business model? You just make podcasts for anybody that hires you to? And I said, yeah. Am I making a sale right now? And he goes, yeah, I think we've got a job for you. And they've become our longest, most established clients. And so that opportunity to interact with other thought leaders in your field becomes a really valuable B2B opportunity to position yourself as thought leaders. And then finally, the last one is the internal comms. And this is just a really cool story of a project we have going on right now for a company called Nutrient Ag Solutions. They're the world's leading provider of seed and fertilizer input. Good Midwestern values right there, but they have a very decentralized force of crop consultants, about 4,000 people around North America whose job it is to go out and meet with farmers on their farm, test the soil and tell them, here's what fertilizer you need next year. Here's what we recommend for your seeds. Here's where we think you should plant. These people, Nutrient as a company is pivoting right now in a new direction, and they need to get this decentralized workforce engaged and on board with the new direction the company is coming. And we're talking about crop consultants who spend 8 hours a day in their trucks. Podcasting is just a knockout opportunity for them. And so those are some of the major points that I see for ROI. But I think Ben has even better ones than I do.
I can only flip one word that I had to learn. My background before I became an entrepreneur was in trade shows. And in trade shows, ROI is the biggest. I mean, they spend $100,000 to go to a trade show. There's people over on the side of the wall. They're doing the exact same thing, a lot less. But you spend a lot of money. You're like, what's the ROI if you show up here? And it's like, oh, we're going to get a few leads, and you hope they turn into something. But the most part, you kind of just rinse and repeat because you don't have a better way to measure it. And then I went to a trade show about trade shows, and I would learn an objective called return on objective. Like, don't focus on the investment, focus on the objective. And I was like, oh, what a crazy idea. Like, focus on your goal. Why are we even going? What do we need to come away with as our goal and objective? And in podcasting, I've really applied it, and it makes a lot more sense as well, because don't focus on what you're going to get back on it. Focus on what are the marketing goals you have, what are the sales goals you have, and what could you actually engineer in a podcast to hit the mark. ROI is something you've like thrown into the wind and you hope something blows back. Sometimes it feels like, but objectives is like you snipe a sniper in the Marine Corps. You point it down range, put it at your target, you pull the trigger, you hit it. If you know those objectives, if you know those goals that you always struggle with, the return on objective is really, really the right way to think about it. And there's one other like frame of reference that Dusty hinted on, but I want to extrapolate a little bit further for it. Is a door opener to people you don't yet know. So the best reason to have an interview with someone is a podcast. Without a podcast, emailing someone that you want to talk to, they're most likely going to say no. So I've consulted on this a couple of times. Think of people that you have a hard time finding. The markets that you're trying to penetrate. Like, you just decided we're going to move into this market yesterday, and we have no idea how to reach those people. If you create a podcast interviewing people that market already knows about, you're going to become familiar with people in that market, and you're going to get connections into that market that you didn't have before. So using it as a strategic door opener is another like a hack behind the podcast that most people don't think about, because it just sounds like audio and it sounds like storytelling. But you can point this at any objective, and it could open doors. It can get you in audiences that you don't yet know. It can build know, like, and trust that would take millions of dollars in Super Bowl ads to type do. You do it with a little bit of time, a little bit of energy and focus, and a little bit of objective, and you can get that mark where you need it to.
You know, it's I just wanted to add one more thing to that. It gives you an opportunity to celebrate your clients and members. That's what we use it for as a chamber. We bring in subject matter experts who are connections of the chamber, who are members of the chamber, and we give them an opportunity to share their subject matter expertise, which, you know, gives them a wider audience. It makes them feel good. We can piggyback on each other's networks, which multiplies the expansion there. You can use it to highlight subject matter experts that you want to become members of your organization, that you want to become clients. It's a great opportunity to open that door. You bring subject matter experts in, you have them share their expertise, have them share their story, you ask them questions and you listen. I mean, it's networking 101. When you network with people, you ask questions and you shut up and you listen. It's just doing that with a bigger platform. Now, it's crazy here. I can't believe that we're rounding third and running out of time here. I want to make sure that we get to everything, because I'm sure there's 1,000 a la carte questions. I got one here from online. So I'm going to do a rapid fire.
Yes.
I'm going to throw it out. I'm going to throw out some questions. I'm going to open it up to questions here, and we're going to do some rapid one sentence reply answers to these
We're
questions.
podcasters. We don't speak in one sentence replies. Like, you're telling us to turn off what is on by default.
I can't believe you're shocked that we're at the end of our time, because I feel like I'm just getting warmed up.
If we want to get to lunch, we're going to have to rapid fire it. So the question is from LinkedIn user: frequency of a podcast. My answer is yes. You should be consistent. That's your only benchmark.
100%. 100%. And I'll add to this, driven by the audience. If you think your audience wants weekly, do weekly. If you think your audience only has time for monthly, do monthly. But like so many things with podcasting, let the audience drive.
I will say yes, and I'll plug what Dusty didn't say. His podcast, Lead Balloon, is ranked #1, and he publishes 1 episode a month.
Is it once a month?
Once a month. I'm very lazy.
So much energy into one episode to increase the quality, to increase the storytelling, to make sure he's telling the right story, because that's also important. And so, yes, to making sure you keep going. But again, you make whatever rules you want to apply to it.
How long is it going to take for this thing to take off and start making us money?
As long as you don't necessarily focus on what the objective is. If you lose sight of the objective, it's going to take a lot longer.
Same. I would not ever launch a podcast for the sole purpose of collecting ad revenue, if that's what you're saying, because
no way.
That is a fool's errand. But
ad revenue, if you're not Joe Rogan, you're not gonna make ad revenue.
I cashed my check from Megaphone last month for the ad revenue that we brought in. It was $10. That's not what drives our sales.
Ad revenue is not going to help you very much unless you become famous, and I hope you do. You know, how much is it going to cost me to launch this thing? With having a decent quality product, not like studio quality, best of the best, but how much is it going to cost?
It really depends. I've seen operations that'll slap together a podcast for you for a few $100s. On the flip side, if you want to go all the way up to the highest level, the gold standard of quality, NPR produces some of the most compelling and most intense podcasts in the world. They spend $11,000 per minute of programming.
Holy cow.
So I like to think that what we charge our clients falls quite a bit below that, but still comfortable enough that we're able to produce an NPR level podcast just on a community radio budget.
What about you, Ben? How much did it cost you to launch?
I would say $100, and I would season his advice with NPR's. You start wherever you can. The most important part of podcasting is you have to start. Like, you can't grow, you can't learn, you can't do anything until you hit publish. Like, it's a simple word, but literally everything you want, every goal, everything that this thing is supposed to do is on the other side of publish. Whatever you have to do, whatever you can afford to meet your objective right now, you need to start from that moment. So it's not like, oh, I need $5,000 worth of equipment and I can't start yet because I don't have that. No, if you have an objective, if you have a reason to podcast that's worthy of it, you start with whatever your budget can afford, because you can't get learning until you're on the other side of publish. And it's more important to be moving in podcasting than it is worrying about being perfect.
All right, we're going to have to go rapid, and I do want to answer questions out here. When is the best time, if we've decided that this would be a fruitful endeavor for our company or our brand, when is the best time to start a podcast?
Probably 5 years ago, but if not, then now.
Now. Okay.
Now.
Yep, and I say now as well. Do you need, a popular bit of advice is that you need to have 10 to 15 to 20 episodes in your pocket by the time you launch. Otherwise, you might as well not even do it. Is that good advice? Yes or no?
I would say you want 6 recorded episodes and you want to launch with 3 episodes already out there.
So day one, you don't just launch 1 episode.
I want you to binge my podcast so you're looking forward to the 4th one.
There's another reason for that too, is Apple Podcasts gives you more prominence after you launch and you get more views with more episodes. Some people even say this is something we do with the Chamber. We split every episode into 1, 2, or 3 episodes, depending on how long it is. That gives us more advertising opportunities for bumpers on the front and the back end. It puts it in more digestible chunks and it increases the views.
Work that algorithm. But I will add, you should have planned your first 20. You should have ideas for 20.
Advice. All right, rapid fire. Throw out your questions. We got a few minutes left. We're going to answer them real quick. Kit.
Of a connector to actually the audience that I'm trying to entertain to. But when speaking from a business perspective, I still have a mouth. And because that's kind of how I branded myself. Like, I am what you see. Like, I don't try to candy coat things or anything like that. Like, how can I, well, you offend everybody nowadays. So how can I still be authentic to me? Because the F-bomb is me. Like, if you know me, you know it's going to come out at some point, respectfully, situational. I'm not up on the stage, doing that. But I stay true to yourself. If you're still trying to be that business-minded, but you don't want to falsify, putting on my Russian hat and being all
so
alive. I want people to know that when they get with me within 10 feet, that they can get a little burned.
So for people listening at home, the question was, how can we stay authentic? If authentic is in your face and potentially puts you at risk,
F-bombs.
Yeah, for F-bombs or whatever. Well, how do you balance that? Is the advice just be yourself no matter what?
I'd say open the show with a disclaimer and learn how to edit, because if you go on a particularly blue streak and you look back at it and say, oh, that's too much, you can always, pull a few of those out in post-production.
For me, I would say once you declare where you're going, this is who I am, this is who I'm talking to. As long as the person that you want to listen is going to resonate, that's where you want to go. And the clearer that you can actually draw a line and this is who I am, this is who I'm not, you're going to know you're in the right direction. And as Adam has learned, you really start hitting the wall of understanding you're onto something when the internet comes back and says you suck. So the more you actually get feedback,
I got plenty of
that you're not fitting in, you're not saying the right thing, that's actually the universe telling you you're getting closer to who you're meant to talk to. So to me, I take it as once you get those haters, that's a good sign you're going the right direction.
I want to get another question in here before we adjourn. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so if you have, I think you have enough type of voice, story to tell, you have an affiliation with the stuffy corporate character. Is it simple enough to say, hey, the views are my own? And if you want to know what I do elsewhere, Google me and you'll find me? Or is it more complicated in terms of the...
Are you in an industry where compliance is a big issue, like banking or insurance? Or okay,
So
that is a can of worms. And what I would say is what you're going to want to do is talk to a guy like Dusty who does this for a living. Especially if you've got the financial backing of a financial institution or a larger corporate entity, then this is the way to do it. Like,
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And my first piece of advice, just coming from a public relations and marketing background, would be have a conversation with somebody about it. Talk to your boss and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. It's an opportunity for us.
Mm-hmm.
There are also inherent risks. And I just want to make sure that A, you're on board with it, B, you're cool with it, and C, that this isn't a surprise to you. And I think that with those ground rules covered, I think that usually especially if you have a cool employer, you can find some wiggle room to do something really cool.
Well, friends, I'll let you ask these two subject matter experts questions offline here. Unfortunately, we have to adjourn. Lunch is coming up here in a minute. For those of you that are watching at home, this was super informative, and we could have just gone on for hours and hours and hours. We did have a question. What's the name of Ben's podcast? It's the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. And Dusty's
definitely
podcast,
check it out.
Yeah, it's very, very good. He interviewed a guy named Adam Bratz not too long ago.
Way back in the beginning, you remembered me before I was famous.
I was one of the before you. That's funny. Yeah, I was never famous, so I appreciated the opportunity.
You're famous. You got someone that you just met already watching your TikTok.
Russian hat guy is pretty famous, man.
But yeah, Military Veteran Dad Podcast, the Lead Balloon Podcast. Also check out Podcamp Media. If you, your business, or your brand are looking for some help getting launched, this guy knows his stuff. I'm telling you, he really, really does. Check out every Wednesday, 11:30 a.m. live, and then on in perpetuity on our YouTube channel, Office Hours Live, the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate all of you tuning in here. We appreciate all of you tuning in at home. And we're going to go enjoy some good old-fashioned lunch programming. Yeah, appreciate you tuning in. Everybody have a good day at home. Everybody have a great rest of your conference here.